about the history of the Knights of Columbus. Why are we here? What do you know about the Knights of Columbus? When was it founded? I think most people know that. Are there Catholic fraternal organizations that are older than the Knights of Columbus in the United States? And if so, what are they? How is Notre Dame instrumental in the integration of blacks into the Knights of Columbus? Who founded it? What's the relationship between Father McGivney and spoons? It's an interesting question for you. Why do we say the Rosary? Why was Mary important to Father McGivney? Father McGivney was of Irish heritage, right? His father's name was Patrick. He's thoroughly Irish. So why are we in an organization named after an Italian? I mean, why aren't we the Sons of St. Bridget or the Sons of St. Brendan, or why aren't we something with St. Patrick? Why an Italian? And why Knights? So there's a lot of questions, and so I did some research. And we were founded, as most of you know, in 1882. The first meeting was in February 6, 1882. It was officially incorporated in March 29th, 1882. There are organizations that are older than the Knights of Columbus. The St. Vincent de Paul Society actually started in France in 1833, came to the United States in 1845. But other than that, the next two closest ones to the Knights of Columbus are the Massachusetts Catholic Order of Foresters, which started in 1879, 3 years before the Knights of Columbus, and the Catholic Benevolent Region, which started in September 1881, just a few months before the Knights of Columbus. Father Michael J. McGivney is the person that started it. Does anyone know what the J stands for? Joseph. Why is that important? It's not, but it's just kind of interesting. So, why is Mary important? Father McGivney's parents were Patrick and Mary, good Irish people. More than that, he went to St. Mary's Seminary in Montreal. Then from there, he went to St. Mary's Seminary in Baltimore, Maryland. He celebrated his first Mass at the Immaculate Conception of Mary, and then he was appointed pastor at St. Mary's. And so as a result of that, he felt a real closeness with Mary. That's part of the reason why we say the Rosary at our meetings and why there's dedications to Mary. Why Columbus? Why not St. Patrick or something like that? Well, at the time that he founded the organization, there was a lot of persecution of Catholics, and Catholics weren't really well looked up to. But Protestants, for the most part, admired Christopher Columbus because he founded America, discovered America. And so Father McGivney thought it would be an interesting twist to honor someone who was a Catholic who the Protestants greatly admired. So it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. And he originally called it the Sons of Columbus, but a lot of the people that helped him found it were in the Irish Fighting Brigade during the Civil War. They wanted something more military, so we became Knights, which is how we are, the Knights of Columbus. Let me tell you a little bit about Father McGivney. He was born August 12th, 1852, died August 14th, 1882. I'm saying 1890, so he was only 38 years old when he died. He was a very young man. So he founded the Knights of Columbus in 1882, which means he only had about 8 years from the time he founded it until he passed away. And during that time, he built it up considerably to the point that there were about 100 councils in action before he passed away, which is considerable growth when you think about it in the days before mass communication and those sort of things. He was born in Waterbury, Connecticut, the first of 13 children. 6 of them, however, died in infancy. And so he was familiar with childhood death. He dropped out of school at age 13, and he went to work in a spoon factory. So he made spoons for 3 years, from age 13 to 16. Then at the age of 16, he entered the seminary. And in Montreal, St. Mary's, was there for 5 years, a little bit less than 5 years, and his father passed away. And so he had to come back home to help raise the family, and understood, obviously, what the death of a parent could mean. The bishop offered financial help to him, and so then he was able to go back to the seminary and entered St. Mary's Seminary again, but this time in Baltimore, Maryland. He celebrated his first Mass in 1877, the Church of the Immaculate Conception of Mary. And then on Christmas Day, 1877, he became pastor of St. Mary's Church in New Haven, Connecticut. When he decided to found the organization, a fraternal organization, a few years later, he went to those that were in existence, St. Vincent de Paul Society, the Massachusetts Catholic Order of Foresters, and wanted to emulate them, but their charter restricted them to Massachusetts. So he couldn't do the same sort of thing in Connecticut, although he wanted to. So then he was faced with having to start something new. He held his first meeting in February 6, 1882, and was made a legal entity, as I mentioned, on March 29, 1882. Within 8 years, it had grown to 100 councils. Right now, there are approximately 15,000 councils worldwide, so significant growth. As I mentioned, because of the death of his siblings and the death of his father, he understood how the impact that death has on families. So he wanted some sort of a death benefit, and that was part of the reason why he started the organization. But he also wanted a fraternal organization as well. He did start the insurance program, and as of today, the Knights of Columbus have about 2 million insurance contracts with about $100 billion, with about $21 billion worth of assets. So considerable growth financially. He started a fraternal organization in large part because there were a lot of secret societies at that time, the Masons and others, and those were antithetical to the church. The church did not want people belonging to those, and so the things that Catholics could participate in were very limited. So he founded it, and initially the main principles were unity and charity. So we understand the order, the degrees. There were only two initially. The third order, fraternity, wasn't added until a year after Father McGivney died. So fraternity was added a year after that. The fourth degree had its first exemplification in 1900. So 10 years after he passed away. Today there are about 2,500 fourth degree assemblies worldwide. Interesting fact, shortly after the fourth degree was formed, somehow the word got out about this fourth degree and what it was about, and some organization created a bogus oath about what fourth degree people swore to. And the oath said, fourth degree Knights are sworn to exterminate Freemasons and Protestants, as well as flay, burn alive, boil, kill, and otherwise torture anyone, including women and children, when called upon to do so by church authorities.
Do it with a smile.
Wait a minute, that's what I like doing.
That was the oath that fourth degree members supposedly took. During the 1928 presidential election, the Ku Klux Klan distributed 1 million copies of that oath. And as a result, Alfred E. Smith, the first Catholic Democratic nominee, lost the election. The oath was actually read into the congressional record by Thomas Butler, the U.S. representative from Pennsylvania, which proves you really can't prove everything that a politician says.
No shit.
After examining the oath, the Committee of High-Ranking California Freemasons came out with a statement that said, the ceremonial of the Order of the Knights of Columbus teaches a high and noble patriotism, instills a love of country, including a reverence of civic duty, and holds up the Constitution of our country as the richest and most precious possession of the Knight of the Order. And so the issue was finally laid to rest. But then came another issue, the issue of integration and immigration. How do we inculcate people after World War I into our society, something we're dealing with today? And there was fear that people would not become American. And so organizations and states started to try and force public education upon people to make them truly American. And in 1922, the voters of that bastion of liberal thinking, the state of Oregon, passed the Oregon Compulsory Education Act. The law was primarily aimed at eliminating parochial schools, especially Catholic schools.
Jeez.
It was promoted by groups such as the Knights of Pyreus, the Federation of Patriotic Societies, the Oregon Good Government League, the Orange Order, and the Ku Klux Klan. The Compulsory Education Act required all children in Oregon between 8 and 16 years of age to attend public school, not parochial school, by 1926. However, Roger Nash Baldwin, an associate director of the American Civil Liberties Union, and a personal friend of the then Supreme Advocate, future Supreme Knight, Luke Hart, offered to join forces with the Knights and challenge the law. And the Knights of Columbus pledged an immediate $10,000 to fight the law and any additional funds. The case became known as Pierce versus the Society of Sisters, and it became a seminal United States Supreme Court decision. Ultimately went to the United States Supreme Court, significantly expanded coverage of the Due Process Clause in the 14th Amendment, and in a unanimous decision, the court held that the act was unconstitutional and that parents, not the state, had the authority to educate children as they thought best because of the Knights of Columbus fighting that act. Then we came to racial integration in the 1920s. Growing anti-Semitism, growing fear of Germans, and racial integration. As the century progressed, more and more councils started to become integrated, but many were not. Church officials and organizational leaders encouraged it, and by the end of the 1950s, the Supreme Knight met with President John F. Kennedy, who himself was a fourth-degree Knight. I don't know if you know that, but John F. Kennedy was the only president to be a fourth-degree Knight. And they talked about civil rights and those sort of things. And a few months later, a Notre Dame alumnus had his application rejected to become a member of a Knights of Columbus Council. Now today, we just basically say all in favor, and everybody goes, yep. And everybody gets in. It's pretty much unanimous whenever we ask for a new member to come in. But it wasn't always like that. People had to vote and say yes or no, and people rejected this person's application. As a result, 6 council members resigned in protest. The incident made national news. Hart declared that the process for membership would be revised at the next Supreme Convention, but he died before it could take place. However, the 64th Supreme Convention was held at the Roosevelt Hotel in New Orleans. A few days before the convention, the new Supreme Knight learned that the hotel only admitted white guests and immediately threatened to move to another venue. The hotel changed its policy, and so did the order. The convention amended the admissions rule to require 1/3 of those voting to reject a new member. So no longer could 1 or 2 people do it, it had to be 1/3. In 1972, the Supreme Convention amended it again, requiring a majority of members voting to reject a candidate. And now we just typically rubber stamp it, but it still applies that a majority of people could reject a candidate. It is designed to prevent that sort of racial prejudice from happening again. A few other things. In 1954, lobbying by the order helped convince the United Congress to add the phrase "under God" to the President's Pledge of Allegiance. So that is because of the Knights of Columbus. Similar lobbying convinced many state legislatures to adopt October 12th as the Columbus Day. And in 1937, FDR made it a national holiday, again because of our dedication. And on April 9th, 2006, the Board of Directors commented on U.S. immigration policy. It said it was intensely debated and divisive issue. They called upon the President and the United States Congress to agree upon immigration legislation that gains control over the process of immigration, but also rejects any effort to criminalize those who provide humanitarian assistance to illegal immigrants. Provide those immigrants an avenue by which they can emerge from the shadows of society and seek legal residency in the United States. So an issue that was at the forefront of this recent campaign is something that the Knights of Columbus have been fighting for the last decade. There's a whole lot more I could talk about, and I will in future lectures, but I thought I'd give you a little history. We have a rich history, and there's a lot of things that I didn't know, and I'm not sure that you knew all this beforehand, but if you did, great. But if you didn't, or to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.